So I would like to welcome Christy Nyiri and Allan Coe. They both work for Automatic and they specialize in WordPress. And I'm super excited to listen to what they have to say. And as many of you know, our website has just been designed and by both the ATypI website team and also by Automatic. And I personally is super interesting in what's going on behind the scenes, like how do we work with typography, etc. Uh, I would like to take time to just say to all the participants that please ask questions in the chat. I think there is a Q&A where you can write your questions, and then there's a sort of a small chat room where you can say hello to everyone. And after this presentation, we will go to the hangout room, at least and I hope that you can join and we can continue discussing. And you will find the hangout space when you go to the agenda and on the top. So with no further ado, please, Christy and Allan.
Howdy, welcome to our talk on WordPress and dynamic fonts. We are Christy and Allan, and we are lead designers on the WordPress.com special projects team at Automatic. If you don't know WordPress, it's a platform for making websites that powers about 40% of the internet and is owned by parent company Automatic. Automatic is a pretty cool company. It's fully remote with over 2,000 employees in 100 countries. They're big advocates of open source because WordPress itself is open source. What is open source? Open source software is source code that anyone can inspect, modify, and contribute to. Lots of fonts are open source, such as some of the ones that are found on sites like Google Fonts, and we use a lot of them in the projects we make on our team. And now here's a little bit about us.
My name is Allan Cole, and I've been at Automatic for about 6, almost 7 years. I'm a designer, a developer, an artist, an illustrator. I make music, really just a jack of all trades. I also really enjoy playing tennis.
My name is Christy Nyiri, and I've been with Automatic for almost 2.5 years. I went to art school, but taught myself how to do design and development after that. And I have a really large 4-leaf clover collection that's almost at 100 clovers at this point. As design leads on the special projects team, our job is to showcase the best of what's possible with WordPress out of the box, using the latest WordPress products. This also means we are advocates for using open source tools and especially caring about accessibility, meaning that in our designs we pay a lot of attention to things like font sizes, color contrast, and motion, which can be problematic for people with visibility issues. Our partners are a mix of influential people and organizations, businesses, not-for-profits, among others. A few of our favorite sites include A List Apart, Print Magazine, Supremacy Project, Buckminster Fuller Institute, Noma Restaurant, and of course, one of our latest, ATypI.
So before we get into all the fun, awesome typographic stuff you can do with WordPress nowadays, I first have to cover Gutenberg and what it is, how we use it, and what it's all about. So what we're looking at here is a very basic site structure that I built using Gutenberg. And all it really is, if you break it down, is 3 different sections. There's a top level section called a header, the middle one, which is a content area, and a section here at the bottom for the footer. And we can think of each of these sections almost as blocks that are kind of stacked on top of each other. And the reason I use that term is when we jump into the back end here, that's literally what we see. Where at the top here we have a header. Underneath that, there's a query loop, which is pulling out content from the database and displaying it. And then under that, we have a footer for credits and stuff. And again, it's a very basic layout, but it's a thing that I can entirely build out in this editor just by making changes to these blocks, more or less, right? And blocks are kind of a way to think about them are maybe like modular sets of content that you can move around, you can change layouts, you can change design and typography within them. And they're really great for just expressing different ideas. And to give you a brief overview, if I click this little plus sign over here, there's a whole set of blocks for pretty much everything. We have them for paragraph, we have them for headings, quotes, pull quotes, galleries. You can embed audio with them, images, buttons. You can use them to lay out columns and all kinds of things. You can really kind of use these very basic blocks to build full page layouts. And so that's essentially what we have here. And so just to kind of give you a quick example of, one of the main things about Gutenberg, which is to have it so that the editing experience mirrors what you expect to see on the front end. And so as you can see here already, if I were to, select this header and change the background to, let's do a light gray here. You'll see here in the editor, I can see that change and how it's taken effect. And so if I save it and then view that on the front end, you'll see the page that we looked at earlier now has this gray background in the header. And so again, this is just very small changes that I've made. But you can imagine once you're, kind of editing deeply on everything, including like the site title, you're working on spacing, margins, borders, all those kind of things, which are available in Gutenberg, you can do quite a bit. And so I'd encourage you all to, play around with Gutenberg and experiment with how the tools work and see how they work. So with Gutenberg, we have a number of typographic tools and features available at our disposal, and it's really easy to apply them without using any code or CSS. I'm going to show you some of that here. So first, let's take a look at this paragraph block here. And over on the right, you'll see there's a typography section. And if we open this submenu, there's a whole bunch of different features we can turn on and tweak to express different ideas or concepts. And so to just kind of go through a few of them, the first here is just size. You can go from small, medium, large, all the way up to extra large. And moving on, there's actually let's set this to large just for presentation purposes. There's also appearance where we can change the font weight and also the italic or regular appearance. There's a line height setting, which we can, bump up or down depending on the context. Letter spacing, which, has a lot of different units that you can use, which is pretty useful. There's also text decorations for underline and strike through. There's also a letter case where we can make things uppercase, lowercase, camel case. And then a cool one that we have here is a drop cap option, which is literally just a click of a button and you get this nice kind of classic, pattern maybe from the old world of print. And and so even you can actually even go in a little bit deeper than this. And if let's select some text here, we can use this drop down and get access to a few other features like subscript, where you may want the font to sit a little bit below. There's also superscript where you can have the text sit above, and then some other ones again for strike through on a per word basis, which is useful. And then in addition to that, there's also a way to highlight the text, which is really cool, where you can set a text color. Let's go with the blue here, and then also even a background color. Let's just use a pink so we can see it. And you can see it now that text is highlighted that way. And so, so there's like a lot of features like this where you can just express typographic ideas really easily. And so it's a really powerful tool. So if we extend this idea a bit further, you can imagine when you're creating a site, it could be a bit cumbersome to have to go in and make all of these individual edits for every single post or page or anything else you might want to create in your website. And so built into Gutenberg is a global style editor, which allows you to make typographic decisions on a token based level. And what that means is that when when I'm making edits, I don't have to directly edit the content. Instead, I can set global rules that the content will automatically adhere to that fit a certain style or approach to design that I'm going for. And so you can see there's a bunch of stuff for typography and color and layout that apply to everything. So again, just focusing on typography, if I click through here, I can click text to just edit, what might be available for text. And so, if I wanted to change all of the fonts to Libre Franklin, I make that one or two clicks and you see all the fonts have now switched to that. If I wanted to go to Libre Baskerville, I can very easily change all of the fonts all at once and not have to worry about making this decision every single time I want to edit a piece of content. Instead, this gets baked into the system, and anytime I create something new, after saving these global settings, they are automatically applied. And it also works on a per block level, where if I wanted to, for instance, like edit the typography that appears in the button, but not for the entire site, only the instance of buttons, then I can go and customize blocks individually. And you can see there's a bunch of them in here. So you can imagine it can get pretty deep. But it's also just really powerful that, we're able to make these kind of decisions on a global level and on a per content level as well. And so it's just a really powerful tool. And so just to kind of show you how that could play out, if I click on buttons and then select typography, let's say I wanted to use Libre Franklin for the buttons. I make that choice and you can see just the font for the buttons changed. None of the other box were affected. I could even go in and make that text bold, I believe, if I choose that. I can change the font sizes for the buttons. And again, there's some other ones that are here as well that I could tweak. But again, you can see how clever this is, where once I save these global settings, when I go and create a new post, these decisions are already made for me. And so as a publisher or editor, I don't need to also be a designer. Those design decisions are baked in. And so again, a really powerful feature that just allows you to have a deep control over type and how it can be used to express ideas.
So following up on the typography tools that Allan showed you in Gutenberg, I want to dive a little deeper into the font sizes. So when you add a heading or a paragraph, they come with default sizes, and you can also change them, of course. Now what this does when you use the default sizes, it applies fluid font scaling to your front end site. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this and go to the front end, refresh. This is how it looks. I'm going to open Chrome Developer Tools. This just allows me to scale the viewport down to like, like spoof a mobile width versus a desktop width. This is generally how I test styling when I develop sites. So you can see that as I scale down the viewport width, it also scales the text of the heading and the paragraph here. So it creates a nice kind of like seamless sizing for your text, which makes things look a little nicer and bigger on desktop and a little smaller on mobile to get more reading in. Now I'll show you the difference if you use definitive sizing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the paragraph in the heading. I'm going to change the heading, I think, to, let's see, I believe like 48 pixels, or maybe it's a little smaller. 36. I'm trying to, it is 48, isn't it? What am I doing? And then we'll change the default font size to 16 pixels, or maybe we'll do 18. So that kind of like duplicates this a little bit, not a little bit, like about the same font sizes. We'll save this, go back to the front end, and refresh. So you can see our duplicated paragraph and heading. Now when I scale down, you'll see the ones that we did definitive pixel sizes aren't actually scaling, so they're a little bit larger. So anytime you add a custom size with a heading. Let's just duplicate this again and change it to like a very large text size. We'll then change this to say like 70 pixels and save it and go back to our front end. Refresh, and you can see that our large text, again, like the other custom sizing, isn't gonna scale like the fluid Gutenberg text sizes. Now you can get this to scale. You'll just have to do some extra coding in your CSS files. What you want to use is something called a clamp. It sets a minimum size and a larger size, and you can get it to scale, but it will require a bit of custom work. But yeah, that's how you can apply custom fluid font sizing in WordPress.
So another handy tool that is essentially part of Gutenberg is the ability to select custom fonts. As a web designer, it's probably the first thing I think about is type when I'm designing. And so having the ability to, explore different type options and test them out is really, critical. And so we have this tool here that's actually a part of a separate plugin called Create Block Theme that works with Gutenberg to allow users and designers and developers to add custom fonts, both ones that are coming from Google, and then also you can even upload your own local fonts that you may have that are unique to you or your business. And so it's really, really handy tool. So I'm going to walk through how it works here really quickly. First off, you would probably want to start on the Google Fonts website to do a little bit of research first, just to get a few ideas of which fonts might work best. There's a huge list there, and so it's kind of cumbersome to test all of them, while you're at this point. But if you have like maybe 4 or 5 that you want to, experiment with, this is a really quick way to do it. And so first you just, click this select font field here, and you'll see a big, huge list pops up. I'm going to try to use Newsreader, which is a really nice font with a lot of different weights. And so I'm just going to choose a few of them here. Regular. I'm going to do maybe a bold here. And then also I'm just going to do this super bold. And then the same for the italics down here. Bold, and then the super bold down there. And from there, I just hit add Google Fonts to your theme. And then we're pretty much done. The font has been added, and if we visit the editor, we just need to refresh the page to make sure it's got the latest updates. Now that the page is refreshed, we can go to Global Styles, and like we did before, go to Typography, select Text, and then from this font download selector, we can choose Newsreader. And you can see all the fonts switched over to the Newsreader font. You can still do all the same things like change the weights and the font sizes and stuff, but we're doing it with this font that we just uploaded a few seconds ago. And so again, super powerful feature that just saves a ton of time and makes it easy to explore ideas right in the browser, as opposed to having to do it in Figma or Photoshop and then code it later. And then it just saves a ton of time to explore and experiment this way. Adding variable fonts to Gutenberg is actually pretty simple and not that much different than what we did previously with Google Fonts, except it's actually a little bit easier. So looking at this tab here called Embed Local Font and Current Theme, which again is included in the Create Block Theme plugin here, we're basically just taken to this screen, and what we're going to do is first upload a variable font file. This one here is called Azarray Mono. I'm going to upload that. Just going to fix the name here for clarity, and then also update the font weight to include the full range of weights that are included in that font. And from here, all I have to do is hit upload, and it's done. Notice how we don't have to kind of go through and pick each individual font like how we had to do with Google Font. We just uploaded the one. So now when we go to the editor and refresh our page to make sure we have the latest changes here. We can go to global styles, visit typography, text, and now we have as array mono as an option we can choose. And so if I select that, see all the fonts will change to that font, and all of these actually literally all these weights are just included. I don't have to do anything extra to make these appear. It's just basically all pulling these weights from one single file. And so it makes it really simple and also performant when it comes to website loading speeds. And so, yeah, it's a really, clever way to use a lot of different font weights with only having to rely on one file. Variable fonts are really fun to play around with because they come with a lot of additional features that you typically don't have access to with normal fonts. And so I'm going to give you a brief example of some of that here. What we're looking at is Roboto Flex, which is a variable version of the Roboto font, which I believe is offered on the Google Web Fonts website. And so that's what we're looking at here, but this is basically just what it looks like out of the box. And so over here on the left is this list of what's called axes or axis. And what they are is just different things that you can alter within the font. Each variable font comes with a different set of axes, but there are a few common axes that are common amongst different variable fonts. And so typically you'd see weight, which you'll see when I move the toggle around. All it does is just change the weight of the font. And it goes all the way down from 100 all the way up to 1000, which I guess is like a super extra bold or black. There's also width, which deals with condensed, and then going up to, I guess, basically about a normal weight here, or a normal width here. There's an optical size, which helps with legibility at different font sizes. Where smaller font sizes, you need a little bit more space around the letter forms, whereas at larger font sizes, you can get away with smaller details because they'll still be legible at those bigger sizes. Next, we have grade, which is similar to font weight. If I take the weight down to something a little bit more narrow and then change the grade, you can see how it isn't really changing the shape of the letter forms. It's only just kind of adding more, I guess maybe expanding the line weights a bit. Whereas when I change the width or when I change the weight of the font, you notice the letter form changes quite a bit more. If you look at the J or the Q, how like the different, parts of the letter form are actually altered to achieve that bolder or lighter weight. Grade doesn't do that. It just kind of, I guess, alters the vector a bit so that it's wider or thinner. And so it's just, a slight different way of tweaking the type. Beyond that, we have slant, which is kind of, I guess, a way of getting the italics out of this. And then beyond that, it's just things that are very specific to this font. So extra, I believe, deals with, I guess, the normal weight at the lower end, going all the way up to an expanded weight or extra weight, I guess. And so that's what that does. Not sure what this one is. Let's see, maybe it's a kind of a letter spacing or letter form thing. I think oh yeah, so you can see how the contrast in the letter forms is altering a bit, where it's heavier on the left if I'm all the way on the left side, and then heavier on the right if I'm all the way on the right side. And so that's a pretty interesting one. I haven't seen that done that way before. This one does a similar thing to the vertical contrast, where you can see the top and bottom, or I guess the horizontal lines are adjusted vertically by thickness this way. This next one here, it looks like an X height kind of, or a cap height kind of thing. Or no, X height here for these ones. Or maybe this next one is cap height, yep. And then I think this one is for ascenders. Descenders is the next one beneath that. And this, I guess, just changes the figures or the height of figures within the font. So yeah, so you can see it's almost possible to like generate something new that didn't exist before, even though it's all based on Roboto Flex. And so it's a really powerful tool. And just to kind of get into a few other examples quickly here, you can do a lot with them. You can even do things that aren't fonts, like this kind of wave font thing here, where you can, use these sliders to, I guess, change the appearance of this waveform. You can do a similar thing with these lines here, which is just a nice animation that's just kind of, again, fun to play around with. And then when you start to really get into fonts, I'm looking for one that does something. Oh, wow. This one is a face. I guess you can change his ears, the hair, and his homeschooling, I guess, apparently here is funny. Wow. So yeah, people do a lot of interesting stuff with variable fonts. This one is, this is a nice one. Francis, which I believe is the font we're using on the ATypI website. This is a cool thing here where you can change the softness of this form, which kind of refers back to like a print concept where, you have when it's softer, the forms are a little bit more rounder, printed a little bit heavier maybe. And as you reduce the softness, it just gets really, really thin, almost like a hard edge. And it starts to look more like a Bodoni kind of font here. It also has this wonk feature, which if you look at some of the letter forms like the F or the J, it alters the way that those appear, the different tweaks or different features in the font appear. So this is just a nice, cool thing there. And this tilt one is really cool as well. What it does is it alters the three-dimensional perspective that you see with these fonts. And so you'll see how as I rotate it slowly, the characters kind of shift their perspective to go from left there to straight forward all the way to right. And a similar thing vertically here where it starts to look up versus looking straight and then looking down. And so, yeah, again, it's just another kind of clever use of these kind of custom axes that you can bake into these fonts. And so I won't dig too much further into these. Just think it's a really cool thing to play around with. The site I'm on is actually called vfonts.com, and it just lists basically, I don't know if it's all of the variable fonts that are out there, but it's quite a large amount. There's both paid and open source fonts that are listed here, and it all has links to where you can purchase or download the fonts. And so it's a really useful tool, and I encourage you to check it out and play around and have some fun. So we can't talk about variable fonts without also talking about animating variable fonts. What we're looking at here is a variable font called Heptaslab, which is available on Google's Web Fonts website. And I'm just going to use it to do a very simple animation. There's some math and some delays and stuff happening here, which you kind of don't really need to worry about for this example. But there's also some JavaScript that I'm using to break up the letter forms individually so they can all animate on their own. And so to show you what this all looks like, I'm first going to take the font size and knock it down at the middle point of the animation. And so you'll see how that affects the text here, where we get this nice, smooth, kind of wavy, three-dimensional font thing happening here. And notice how it's only adjusting the font size, which is, technically something you can already do right now. But you can also do a similar thing with the font variation settings for weight, where I can animate the weight of the font in the same way I can do the size. And so I'm going to change things a bit here and make the font weight a little heavier. And let's see how that takes effect. And so now you can see both the font weight and the font size are animating at the same time. And right now it's really smooth, which is awesome. However, with variable fonts, there is a bit of a limitation on how it uses up memory. Variable fonts are pretty complex and heavy, and for the browser to do all of these animations, it takes a bit of work. And so because of that, it can sometimes be heavy on the browser and appear choppy if you're doing, a lot of animations on a lot of different variation settings. But for this simple example, it seems to be enough for this animation to be smooth. And so, just wanted to show that. We'll show or share some examples or resources on how to replicate this a little bit later.
One last example of how you can animate variable fonts is using this font Nabla from Google Fonts. So it's one of these new colorized fonts that you can find on their site now. And what's really cool is if I hover over it, you'll see that it animates with my interaction. So what this font has that the other ones don't is instead of having variable axes that are optical weight or other weight or italicized slant, this one only has two, and they are the extrusion level as well as that little highlight, that white line around the corners and the edges of the font. So in this example, I'm just showing the extrusion. Another thing that's really cool about the variable fonts with color is you can change the color. So right now I'm just going to turn off a color setting I have and save the pen, and you'll see that it defaults to the actual color the font's set in. Now you can change, like on this particular font, each color of the edges and the faces, etc. It's really cool. I don't know if you can animate them yet, but we're looking forward to seeing what kind of awesome customizations you can make with variable fonts in the future. Thanks for joining our talk today on WordPress and dynamic fonts. We hope you learned something new and can go on to implement highly customized typography using all the tools we showed you in the WordPress block editor. We've also gathered a list of all the resources we mentioned today in a page on our website. Just visit automatic.design/ATypI. In addition to these links, you'll also find a list of free and high-quality open-source design resources we published earlier this year, which not only includes fonts, but also icons, stock photos, audio, and other handy assets. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you around on the internet.
All right, finally, we got some microphones back.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for this presentation. We love variable fonts here at ATypI, so we're really excited. Let's see if there will come any questions in the chat.
Well, I think there's a couple that were just in the regular part of the chat. You answered the one about Nick Sherman's vfonts.com website. So that's everybody loves that. I have to share with you, Christy and Allan, there's the creators of a whole bunch of the typefaces you've shown that come to these conferences all the time. So it's really awesome to be able to share some of that stuff and actually know that some of the people that have made it possible are actually sitting here in the room. You know, I think some of the stuff that you shared for making those typographic settings without having to write the code are really fantastic. I know there's some other little niceties that are kind of buried in what WordPress is doing by default these days. I wonder if maybe you can talk a little bit more about those sort of global things that it does. I know you can get it to automatically replace hash marks with quotation marks and stuff like that. What else is sort of coming? What else is Automatic thinking about for WordPress and typographic controls?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, it's to me, it's the most exciting part of, kind of where we're headed with Gutenberg. Like I mentioned, I almost always think of type first. And so having like really deep controls, like, what we showed and, some of what may come in the future is just exciting. And for me, it speaks to a level of design system thinking that I think is starting to take hold these days. It really plays closely with a lot of the thinking that we do in Figma often, and in some other applications as well, where we're not just thinking about like what font and what color needs to appear where. We're thinking about like rules and kind of building things in a more modular way, so that as designers we can kind of set those rules to make publishers or make the experience that publishers have better, in that like they don't have to worry about the design. They can just kind of piece together and glue the blocks themselves. And regardless of what they come up with, it'll basically, or the idea is that it'll always look the way the designer intended. And so it kind of changes the way we think about design as it relates to websites in a lot of interesting ways. Yeah, it's just exciting. Like I think that they're right now basic tools, but when you have a good idea and you have tools that can you know that make it easy to achieve some of these basic things, you can have a lot of really interesting complex expressions that come from that. And so yeah, I think the more this is kind of takes hold, and the more people start to play around with it and experiment with it, the more kind of interesting things you'll start to see. Like obviously animation, 3D stuff, even like interactive, elements. I think will start to appear.
I think that a lot of people want to pop up their own fonts that they do. I just didn't think about it before, but this is actually a very good way of testing your own fonts that we build. So when I test a font, I want to pop it in. I can use it on very like right now. It will be published in real time, which is super interesting. Um, I'm very interested in the variable fonts part. We saw some where there was sort of like if you added a variable font from Access, you took the weight Access from 100 to like extra black 1000. But when we came into the block editor, the Gutenberg editor, we actually saw that it actually turned it into like readable text, like
Yeah.
light, regular, etc. So where do you see, because this is something that we are really interested in, and finding out like what do you do with the other access, for instance, with like will is that still on creating custom CSS, or is that something that you can see ahead that's coming?
Yeah, right now it still has to be done with custom CSS. And to speak a little more clearly, I think what you're describing is that like if you wanted to use font weight 112, right? There's no way to use the editor currently to use that. You have to either use 100 or 200, which aligns with like I guess light or maybe thin or something. And so yeah, I think that because there's a variable there, it means that there's toggles that can be attached to them. Similar to what we saw like with like the line height. Like I can just kind of go up and down and set a specific value to the line height. It's very possible to do the same for fonts. It's just tricky right now because variable fonts, they all come with different axes. And so it may require editing a bit of code to support that, just because each one is a little unique. But that code can, be pretty simple. We already kind of have to do that a little bit in a file that's kind of integral to themes called theme.json, which lists out a kind of schematic of all of the deep global variables that exist in the theme. And so it basically had the potential to uh, tap the variable axes with the theme.json and use that to create the toggles that we would use in the editor to use or to get like specific values. And so I'm almost certain that's a thing that'll come in the future. There's probably somebody already working on it now, but yeah, it's not in core yet.
I've built something like that in a site before in Drupal. Basically, just a similar idea. Basically, make it a parameter that you can sort of add to a piece of content, essentially defining the font, and then have it build in a slider. So I mean, there's a ton of different ways that you can do it that way. It's the first time I'd seen the ability to put the weight range in when you're uploading the font, though. That was really cool to see. Christy, you showed off the sort of the dynamic scaling of some of those font sizes using Clamp, I'm assuming. And so for folks that aren't familiar with the CSS, it's just a way to set a small size and a large size and how you want it to scale. And then based on the width of the window, it will scale the text with that. I'm curious, is there a way to edit those dynamic sizes to sort of change the low and the high end, or is that just whatever is built into the theme?
There is like a specific default that's built into the theme, but if you, again, you edit that theme.json file, you can set more specific sizes for your like extra large size, your lower size, etc. So yeah, it's definitely editable to, possible to customize.
That's great. I think I think I gave my first talk about web typography 11 years ago, and seeing the progress and the simplicity of the code that's behind it and how much can go into into the editing UI itself, I think is absolutely fascinating, and it's incredible how much you've enabled with the block editor and that combination with the global styles. I mean, you could do so much without ever writing a line of code.
Yeah.
I also find it exciting too, because for me, I'm always concerned with efficiency, and sometimes when I have to design everything in Figma and then figure out how to code it all later, it almost feels like double work, because I might make the decisions in Figma, but then I have to then express them later in code. Whereas this, it kind of blends some of those decisions where I can make a design decision without having to use code and do it right on the site, and so it kind of cuts through a lot of the kind of redundant, nature that existed, before we were able to do this stuff right in the browser.
Yeah, and it also brings the idea of when you're in Figma or any sort of pre-editing design tools, you don't really know exactly how it's going to look like because you zoom in and zoom out, but here you do. And that's sort of like, this is what the internet, the nexus between the programming and the design, where we want it, where the designer actually can sort of sketch it up in an actual, like it's there. It's like printing just to check the type for a book cover. I was wondering about the accessibility tools, especially when it comes to typography, like coloring or sizes or something like that. Are there any tools in the pipeline for having like warning or anything like that?
There are warnings actually in Gutenberg. Like if you pick a really light background color and then a really light text color, it will give you like a, hey, this is accessible for some people. Yeah. So that type of thing is built in. And the smallest font sizes and the largest font sizes, like the smallest don't go, I believe, below like 14 or 16 pixels. So like it does meet accessibility that way as well. So it kind of like steers you in directions that are like great for people reading.
That's awesome. I think it's, for those of us that started in graphic design and or work in that in that area a lot, the idea of how creating, writing the text and then setting the text, designing the layout, and then it goes and gets published is really normal. But on the web for years and years and years, it's been, okay, design what you want it to look like, and now we're going to shove any possible content into it, and then there's no more design decisions to be made. It's a really weird way for us to think we could possibly work well, and that's what I love about how well this has advanced, that even on the post level, you can actually make design decisions like right in the admin interface, and that's something that it's more refined here than I've ever seen it, which is really wonderful.
Yeah, WordPress has come a long way in terms of like customizability, especially with Gutenberg's block editor. I remember yeah, before like you would put your content in and you get like one narrow column, but now like you can do any sort of imaginable layout you want in a post with as much different varied content as you want as well.
And I think it's also worth mentioning, I mean, the scale of the projects that you all work on, I mean, it's not just for everybody's little blog. I mean, you all work on some pretty large sites that are running on this platform. What are some of the larger scale things that you've been involved with sitting on this team?
I'd say like maybe the largest, well, for our design eyes anyway, it was like print magazine was kind of like the big, oh God, this is so exciting to work on. Other teams on our company, like the VIP team, they do like really large enterprise scale stuff too. And it's all running on the same backend as WordPress, like all the sites we do.
Yeah, I think that was the reason I wanted to point that out, was just to so people realize that it might be something that gets 100 page views a month. It might be something that gets 100 million page views a month, and it's actually kind of exactly the same thing behind it, which is really amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, our servers are really quick. If you're on WordPress.com, it's all being posted as the same server as like the enterprise level sites, like all the big newspapers and stuff that run on WordPress. So like even your little blog is like getting the same kind of speed that it would as like a huge site.
Yeah, I think for as a type designer, you are sometimes sort of designing type, but you want also people to be able to easily use it. So if you were sitting here and talking with a type producer that produces variable fonts every day, what would your wishes for? Like, how would you would like to cooperate or collaborate with us? What do you wish?
That's an interesting one. Yeah. Honestly, as you could kind of see from the video, the ones that I found most interesting are the things that like you can change that you don't expect, like especially the one that did that kind of perspective thing where it kind of rotated, like that to me is really interesting. It hints at like kind of what I expect from like some of the what I hear about Web3 and like kind of like virtual spaces, like a font that could that plays with dimension in that way. I think it would be really interesting. So I would probably sketch out some stuff and have some ideas in that way.
Yeah. I would I would agree. The weirder, like the more exciting I get.
Yeah.
What is there any? I was just thinking, like, when it comes to non-Latin alphabets, like the maybe some of the like Asian languages. Have you worked with them? Have you does it work smoothly, or do you see something progression in the future? Like, how do you deal with all the, like, for instance, reading of languages that goes from top to bottom and etc. What are your thoughts and experience of that?
I don't know if we've personally worked with a lot on our team. I know we definitely have sites that are in a few different languages, but the way that WordPress works, it is internationalized in multiple languages. I can't remember how many. It's maybe like 9 or 11. I have no idea. I can't speak to that. But I believe, as far as I know, that like things are set up to work in multiple languages, including right to left. But don't quote me on that.
Yeah, and there are some.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I was going to say it's definitely something that's considered a lot because we have such an international user base. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, there are like a couple of also like plugins that help foster that. The one that comes to mind, I haven't used it in a while, but WPML, that one has features where you can basically choose the languages that you wish to support, and then it gives you editing experience that's specific to that. And so if you're using, if you're editing for one of the a user that's maybe in a country where they read from right to left, then the editor would switch to that when they're sorry, not the editor, but the site would switch to that when they access it. And so it gives us a way to kind of experiment with what that would look like before, or I guess the editor gives us a way to kind of preview what that would look like for those users before they actually have access to it. And so it's yeah, it's a thing I know mostly am familiar with just from theming, where when you're designing a theme, and obviously you want as many people as possible to use it, you do have to kind of consider the different ways in which people read. And so yeah, it's a tricky thing to solve because not it's I think oftentimes like an afterthought. You design it for the thing that you know best, but you kind of always have to be aware that just designing for you isn't enough. Sometimes you have to kind of consider others out there that have different experiences, different cultures, and things like that.
Yeah, this is definitely why we exist. And ATypI is to get this platform and get all these different perspectives and come in with different alphabets, solutions, and cultures and wayhouse and etc. So I think we could talk about this for me very long time, but there is we are super excited and we are so grateful for all the work that you have done for our website. That was actually we lost and we gained the database actually just we lost it and then we found it again and we have gone archive and you have been for us and worked for us for about like what you say, Jason, would it be like 1.5 year now?
Yeah, it's over a year that we've been
Yeah.
working together on it, and for anybody that hasn't gone and checked what atypi.org looks like, it is thanks to the collaboration with Automatic that it's in such a great state now. Design's beautiful. It was a wonderful collaboration with our web team, led by Laura Messiger, and her incredible designs. We actually did a lot of prototyping together. We sort of took the typographic ideas, and I just wrote an HTML page and said, well, this is kind of what we had in mind, clamp and all that other stuff. And the team did an incredible job bringing that to life. So you'll see a lot of the things that they were demonstrating in use on atypi.org, which is really wonderful to see how well it scales across screen sizes and how well it makes use of both static and variable fonts. That's been a great partnership.
Yeah, and also we, for all our members that are listening, we have a lot of pages that we are just still looking over and making sure. So all the community pages and all that, they are ready and set, and we are just doing the final touches. So, if you don't find what you're looking for on the website, come back in a week or two and you will know that we are publishing continuously. So with this, I want to say thank you for Allan and Christy, and from us, Jason and me and the whole ATypI team. And if somebody wants to continue asking you questions, we will be in the Hangout room and talk further. So you will find this Hangout space on the top of the agenda. You just click and there we are. So please join us there. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.